At the Top of the Stone Wall, an original story written and read by Dave Hawkins. Copyright 2018. Part 3. The gloom of the late afternoon turning to evening was on. Darkness began to seep in. Hupstead's knife, snug in Blur's hand, glinted dimly as he turned the blade over and over. He'd let go of Hupstead, who knew his only chance was to buy time by not bolting. Besides anything else, he did not have the faintest clue where he could bolt to. This was Rusty and Blur's turf, and all three of them knew it. "Slice is nice, sharp," Blur grunted out. Hupstead ever so slowly began to massage his wrist, which had been in the vice-like grip of Blur's left hand only moments before. Rusty had meanwhile positioned himself slightly behind Hupstead's right shoulder. Blur was in front a little to the left. Any move could be cut off in a flash. The river was directly behind Hupstead, and now about 50 paces distant, the waterfall further back. "One ambles away from the noise and doesn't notice it," said Rusty, "and then turn round, slowly." At this point, Hupstead's hero heart and mind were still far from being in the place any self-respecting hero would have hoped. He meekly obliged. "Walk slowly, sir. We want to see your every move," said Rusty ominously. "Watch it," came the familiar growl as Blur pushed him slowly forward, the knife blade too close for comfort to Hupstead's ear. "Dare I ask, politely inquire, as to where we are headed?" Hupstead took a step, then another. "That blasted bell in the tower. It's going to keep us all awake soon. We need to tie it fast with a vine," said Rusty. "That's it? The bell?" Hupstead said with relief. "Why then should I walk slowly?" It's dark. Stumble on anything around here, one can. Hello," said Rusty. "Already said that," grumbled Blur. "Yes, point taken. Hello," Hupstead dravelled. "Hello." "Already said that," grumbled Blur. Rusty spoke as they approached the tower. "I think I know the very person you're looking for. I remember overhearing something the short man said. I do know. Well, hello." Blur quickened his pace despite a slight limp, pushed at Hupstead to clear him out of his way, and faced his twin square on. "Already said that," he growled, slowly enunciating the words to get the point across. Hupstead saw the corner of Rusty's mouth want to break into a smile. Hupstead felt it too. Both had to quell the urge fiercely. Though Hupstead felt his insides squiggling in protest. Rusty nodded and turned to look down the far side of the stone platform. He grabbed hold of a vine that clung half-fastened to the wall as it grew. "Cut away at this one, brother." Blur sliced through the vine, which yielded quickly to the blade. "Hello. Very sharp," said Blur. Both Hupstead and Rusty turned slightly away and quivered in short, silent chuckles. Blur either did not notice or did not react. He busied himself with tying the recalcitrant bell fast to the pillar. "Wind always increases in the evening at this spot. We do this every night, otherwise this bell, one can hardly catch a wink's sleep," said Rusty. "I saw that Blur has a limp," said Hupstead wearily. "Broken leg," said Rusty. "He says it only hurts when he laughs." "Broken? So he never—" Rusty gave a tiny, despairing shrug. "Come on, we'd best get a move on." Hupstead realized with slight alarm how the darkness had not crept in but swiftly overwhelmed the area. He held his arms instinctively very slightly in front of him. "The lights will come on soon," said Rusty. "Monsoon," echoed Blur as they shuffled off. The path was smoothly paved and wide with short grass neatly trimmed on each side. They hadn't gone more than 100 paces or so, and Hupstead realized the woods were getting thicker, even in the almost pitch dark. There was less light from the stars, dim as they had been to begin with. "We're off to your house, are we?" "Not far from here," replied Rusty as he led the way. With Rusty in front, Hupstead felt it a little easier to follow and not trip. The pace was a touch above an easy stroll. "Not long from now, and the lights will come on," said Rusty. Monsoon, echoed Blur. That'll be a relief, struggling a bit, said Hupstead. As the woods became denser, he noticed the grass at the sides of the path was longer, wilder, more haphazard. It was certainly not a plantation they had entered, a thorn tree or two here, a deciduous broadleaf there, and the path was less smooth and lost its paved, smooth feel. Dirt and rocks, a true path through the wild bush, he said to himself, as they made their way slowly on. Hupstead realized that this bit of the path was all too familiar territory for the twins. They were walking easily, dodging stones and holes in the path as if they could walk it with their eyes closed. Indeed, this was almost the case, as they peered this way and that with apparent interest into the dark woods around them. It was so dark that Hupstead could not make out any detail at all, and wondered how the twins were doing so. "That big umbrella thorn yonder is growing a new branch. It'll be a magnificent sight not long from now," said Rusty conversationally. "Oh, yeah," grunted Blur. "Not sure I can see the one you're referring to," said Hupstead uncertainly as he half tripped over a stone the twins had deftly missed. "The one with the Y fork a third up, splits into 4 and then 8 just before the spread begins. The Y on the right is growing a new branch. It's as clear as day," said Rusty without so much as a glance over his shoulder. Hupstead stopped to stare into the darkness, but was nonplussed as to which exact tree it was. He stood rooted for a few seconds, and then he saw it. Not the tree, well, not at first. In the distance, a glow, growing brighter. Hupstead's first thought, initiated he realized by years of conditioned thinking back in the world he came from, was that it was a UFO about to land. Immediately, though, his reaction was no. Too bright, too white, too brilliant. The feelings Hupstead felt were of comfort and peace. It did not seem to have a source either, like a torch or a flame. It was just there. As he watched, it brightened and began to light up the woods in that spot. Soon Hupstead could make out the details of the trees, and he saw the one Rusty had mentioned. In the bright pool of light, he saw the exact colours and textures of the tree. Rich, saturated colours with clean lines and beautiful structure, as if it had been designed precisely like that. Hupstead noted the third branch growing out of the first fork. Rusty and Blur had meanwhile quickened their pace, as if they were nearing more familiar surroundings and home. "Did you see that?" asked Hupstead. "What?" asked Rusty and stopped. "That bright light back there." Rusty and Blur looked at each other. "Was that what you were talking about when you said the lights would come on soon?" Of course, it was Rusty who answered. "Oh, not in your wildest. The pathway lights, house lights, is what I was talking about." "Then what was that bright one I saw over there?" Rusty and Blur stared as if they were trying to think of something to say. "Some say they've seen it every now and then, and not only near that tree." "And yourselves? Surely?" Hupstead asked. The twins frowned and shuffled their feet. Both sheepishly looked down at their colourful boots. "No," grunted Blur. "We're still waiting to," said Rusty. One day. "Did you not see the glow in front of you, bouncing all around at least? It was that bright." Rusty scratched his head, Blur watching and waiting for his reply. "We'll be home soon," Rusty said, and continued on in haste. Puzzled by the recent happening, Hupstead followed without more questioning. He didn't know where he was or where he was going, and thought it best to follow and not stir up anything more. Presently he saw an ominously large and gnarled tree in the gloom just to their left. Hup thought he recognized it as a wild pear, and as they came closer, the characteristic roots draped over the rocks came into view. The three were almost within touching distance of the root stems, and certainly under the tree's crooked branch canopy, when as one man Rusty and Blur stopped mid-step. Hupstead's heart skipped and then raced. Grass rustling. To the left. Footsteps. Breathing. A shadowy figure was loping and stumbling through the grass. Around a tree one moment, dead ahead next. Tall and gaunt, it was clearly a man, and apart from heavy breathing, completely silent. From the desperate and scary moment when Blur had had the knife in one hand and Hupstead in his vice-grip grasp in the other, it had now shifted to one of nervous excitement. Although Rusty and Blur were strangers, they had no apparent fixed motives, good or bad. Hup felt slightly more comfortable that 3 against 1 made for good odds. Plus, his blade was back in his belt. The figure crossed the path squarely and just 10 paces in front of them. Hupstead's mind was racing and he picked up every detail as it happened. The gaunt man was balding at the front and had a mullet straggling down his shoulders. With his head strained forward as if in a terrible hurry and carrying something in his left hand, Hupstead felt sure he had seen this before, but where? Barely had the figure's feet touched down and crashed off into the grass and bush when Rusty grabbed Hup's arm. "No time to lose. Come on!" He started forward at speed. Remember to like and subscribe if you like what you hear.